Go ahead, Madam Chair.
Good morning. This is the Board of County Commissioners Board of Work session. It is Thursday, April 27th, 2023. It is 9:03 a.m. This session is set to go until 10 a.m. This is a hybrid meeting. We're at 3000 Pacific Avenue Southeast, room 110. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. Sitting in the boardroom is Vice Chair Ty Menser and Commissioner Gary Edwards. We also have County Manager Ramiro Chavez. The topic on today's agenda is Economic Development District Briefing, and I believe we have some guests.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We have some guests, and at this point, I will probably like to give the floor to Jenica Machado, our Economic Development Manager, to frame the conversation and introduce our guests.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. Jenica Machado, Economic Development Manager. We are joined with the Executive Director, Michael Cade, of the Thurston EDC, and Jason Robertson, who is the selected contractor for the Economic Development District process with the EDC. And so we met a year or so ago to first talk about the Economic Development District. At that point, it was a topic that we wanted to bring awareness to, but was going to be further down the line for more concrete details and process. And now we're at that point to bring to the commissioners again for an update and a more clear view about where the process is now and the next step. So I'll hand it over to
Thanks, Jenica. This has been an ongoing process. It's something that we've been talking about in the economic development world, about ensuring that Thurston County has every resource for community and economic development as possible. And what we found a number of years ago is that Thurston County is without a district, formal designation as a district. So the conversation that we've been having is that is it appropriate for us to have a district? What resources would we be able to bring to this community federal, and how would we judiciously apply those throughout Thurston County to ensure that the strategies that you have in place, and strategies that the other municipalities and the Economic Development Council have in place are have every chance for success. So today is the conversation of we're starting that process, and really that's it for me as an introduction. I'll turn it over to Jason for more of the background, but this is a project that our board has been anxious about, anxious in the sense of let's make sure that we're asking the questions, let's make sure that we're doing the work and making sure that we're in a position to access every resource possible and identify the ones that are missing because we're missing a lot. So, Jason.
Thank you, Michael. Who will be running the slides? Are you running the slides from over there?
I think Ramiro's going to do that.
Okay. All right, so we're figuring that part out. What I want to do, this is pretty brief. I have a very economical, no-frills slideshow to run you through. What are we even talking about and what does it mean to you? So there has been a district called Colpack. It was recognized by the EDA, and it was Grays Harbor, Pacific, and Mason. And essentially, it just sort of became defunct. And what we did was ask, hey, could we join that district and light it back up? And EDA said, you know what, if the other counties agree, we would love to see that. And so that's what we're starting today. So
I'm just trying to make it full
Yeah, so
screen.
there's a PDF, so it's,
There we go.
there you go.
So I'm going to fast forward to kind of where we're at, and then I'll back it up. But so what we're talking about, if we were to join the region, I'm calling it the PAC Salish or Pacific Salish region because it would extend from the Pacific Ocean to the Inland Sea, and it has a nice little ring to it, and it recognizes our forebears here. And so you can see what that looks like. It would be Mason, Grays Harbor, Pacific, and Thurston County. And what we need to do is complete a study that shows how the region is linked. And I'm working on all of that data now. I think that will be pretty straightforward. So what is an economic development district? It's not a replacement of the EDC. It's not another EDC. It's a tool. And so what we'd be doing is creating a specific region that would be competitive to pursue federal dollars for things like infrastructure and so on, and I'll show you specifically what those things are. There's 380 of these across the United States. It's not uncommon. In fact, in Washington State, only Thurston and Walla Walla counties are not part of a district. The requirements for a district is that it's multiple counties. You can't have your own district. We can't just go out and have the Thurston County district. As I mentioned, we're gonna inhabit the body of the coal pack and reinvigorate it. We need to have what's called a SEDS plan, Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. And so the way that we're going to build that is not create something completely new, but I'm going into every county and finding their economic development plans, their economic development elements for the comp plan, and building from that. So we're not reinventing the wheel or trying to go in a whole separate direction. The plan needs to have some focus areas, like built environment, economic environment, things like that. And at the end of the day, what you're really trying to do, what we're trying to do here is fill a gap we've had in Thurston County for many years, which is getting access to those federal funds. And a lot of you may have been around for the old WASSERT days. Does everybody remember WASSERT, where you had to prioritize your top projects? That's what we're doing here again, but at a federal level. So we need to be able to tell EDA when we're done with this, here are the top 3, 5, 10 things that we're trying to get done to create economic opportunity in our region. Next slide, please. So, so today, if there's a new federal program that rolled out, it would probably give preference to what we call distressed counties, and you guys have had those conversations for years. And so we could apply for some of those grants, but after they did the filter for distressed counties and spent all the money, we wouldn't get access to it. What we do with becoming a district is become competitive because we're eligible at the same level as those other applicants. Some of the things that we can access are the public works grants. There's the economic adjustment assistance, build to scale, partnership planning, and disaster recovery. You know, in the case of something like COVID, we were eligible because it was universally applied. These other programs that are ongoing annual are very selective. The other thing, next slide please, is that each year EDA updates what's most important to them, so you know how to construct a grant application to be competitive. So this year, for example, equity, I won't read the list, you can see it behind me, but we have to keep those things in mind and tailor our applications to those priorities. Next slide, please. And here's where it gets interesting. I think, so in the Thurston Economic Alliance Plan, we identified a specific action as creating the district, but we did that because where we fall short sometimes is in the construction, the infrastructure part of economic development. That's expensive. It's a barrier to create. We can have a parcel, but it's missing a substation to add power or extend a sewer line. This is how we're trying to get there through this economic development district. There's also something that's pretty interesting, which is the revolving loan fund. So we can get federal dollars and then we can fund emerging businesses that may not be yet bankable, but are within the acceptable realm of risk. And we can help underrepresented business owners get started. And then they repay that fund and we do it over and over and over. And that's a tool we don't have today. All right, next. So so the SEDS plan that I'm building is going to be very data-based, just like we did Thurston Strong, right? Use empirical data to drive decision-making. So we're trying to collect the data and say where our strengths, weaknesses. Eventually, we're going to have the governance conversation, right? So how does this thing run? So what I do know is that the development of the plan is being led by the executive directors of each EDC. So these are the ADOs, or Associate Development Organizations, recognized by the state and funded in part by the counties. So there's nothing new there. It's just your top economic people on the job. And it may end up like that afterwards. We may decide we want to have a county commissioner on the governance board, to be determined. I just want to repeat again, what this is a tool. The Economic Development District isn't going to supplant anything that the county is planning. It's a way to accelerate what you're trying to get done. There's no cost today. So the way it works is if we get our SEDS approved and we get started, we get $75,000 a year to help fund a position to run the district. And so the only time you would spend money is if you said, I want to extend a sewer line to Grand Mound and it costs $3 million. A typical grant would be you pay half, the federal government pays half. But that's self-selecting, right, if you want to do that. We have to update our SEDS, Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, every 3 to 5 years. And if we do that in good standing, we keep getting money to fund the position. Next slide. So as far as I can tell, and Michael and I have reached out to the feds, the only thing that we're going to be asking of you is for some form of resolution or acceptance in a meeting minutes of the district. And no money. So I think it's pretty simple. Like I said, there's 380 of these across the US. Some of them are run through EDC type organizations, some through TRPC type organizations. We're taking ours through the EDC. All right, last slide. Just to reiterate, we're gonna build this off of existing plans, not replace them. We've got to do some public engagement. Fortunately for our region, a lot of that has already been done. We have a base layer that's manifest in existing plans. We'll confirm when we come out of this with our proposed priorities that people agree. We have to submit it to the EDA for approval. The EDA will send their recommendation to the governor. The governor will send his recommendation back to all of you as county commissions. You will approve it through resolution, and then we go. So that's as fast as I could do that. Happy to take questions, concerns.
Great.
Oh,
Commissioner Roberts, go ahead.
okay, you snuck in on me.
Two places at
Oh,
once.
I was gonna ask for permission. I want you to know that before I did that. So, Jason, what are the other districts around us? Do they have a name like, Pacific,
Yeah.
Salish, or whatever? I mean, and I don't need them now, but, and I'm curious about how they've been functioning. And, I'm trying to figure why, I can't come up with a reason why we wouldn't wanna do this from an economic development position, because I would think this would be easier for our federal delegation to assist us on different projects possibly. And I'd kinda like to know what those other districts are, shy of Walla Walla, I guess. So I could ask those county commissioners or something, how's it working for you? That kind of a question. I mean, I can think of examples where we've got, areas that aren't served too well that could really use some help, like Rainier needs a septic system or something like that. Well, maybe they can't do their own, but hell, they could tight line it up to Yelm or, down to Tenino or that kind of thing. And is that the kind of thing you're thinking it'll help those underprivileged areas? I mean, Bucota, same way.
Yeah, I think it's a multi-part answer, and then I'll tag team it with Michael, who's been studying this for a long time. But that Rainier example is exactly the sort of thing that we would hope to achieve. As you know, I'm involved in a lot of different things, and so when I met with the EDA rep, I was floating ideas like we're trying to put these navigators in schools, and help kids get into college. And she said, that's very lovely, don't do that with this particular district. You're doing job creation, job retention, and inducing private investment. Well, that's what I want. When I score your thing, it's gonna be how many jobs are you creating? So that's what we'll always have to tie it back to. The other districts, so for example, you know how in Pack Mountain we have Lewis County, but we don't in this? That's because Lewis County's gone with Clark County for a district below us. And then Pierce is up with King County above us. And so we had a conversation, where should we go? And ended up here with this district because it was not operating, and we will probably be able to manage it from Thurston. So it seemed like a good position for us. In talking to others, peers before we started this whole process, they described the district as essential to achieving their economic development plans because it gives you access to funds, a level and volume of funding that you cannot access through state or other programs. So when I mentioned a substation, for example, that's a deal killer in every single county that I've talked to so far, right? They have a piece of land, 200 acres, they have somebody who wants to create 500 jobs, but it's $2.8 million to start to get the substation, so they never do the project. And so that's what we're trying to do here. But you want to add about the districts?
Yeah, it's just actually, so I've been here just about 20 years. I was working in this capacity. When I first came here, I realized the first question I had was, who do I talk to about working with the district? When I was employed at the Snohomish County Economic Development Council, we did an incredible amount of work with the Central Puget Sound Economic Development District, and that's the district that includes Pierce, King, Snohomish, and Kitsap counties. We did all of our rural economic development. We did planning, we did infrastructure development, we did economic development, job recruitment. And so I realized we just didn't have it. We just don't have one here. And that's what we realized. We didn't have a district. We're not attached to one. So I think that's something important to think about is why didn't we have one? And I still haven't really figured out that question. But the notion is every time we go after a grant, think about all the agriculture work that we've been doing. The first question in the box is, which economic development district are you a part of? Check here and define. Well, we always have to check not a part of, and immediately it goes to the bottom of the pile. So that's very disappointing. The other thing that you might want to think about is, as we worked with you and really with Jason as lead architect on the notion of the Economic Alliance, the Thurston County Economic Alliance several years ago, one of the biggest things that we identified as the gap was the revolving loan fund, was the ability to fund startup businesses. You have in Thurston County, we've talked before, you have the most robust ecosystem for entrepreneurship in Washington State. The one thing that's missing is that revolving loan fund. How do we get capital into small business startups? And we've been cobbling it together here and there. We've been doing a pretty good job, very proud of it. I don't want to belittle that work. But that has been a vision of ours, is to make sure that because that builds equity, it builds access and inclusivity. So all of a sudden we have another tool for generating that stuff. Commissioner, your question about what other districts are around us, we're surrounded by districts. The Peninsula has a district, Clallam and Jefferson County is one, and then the counties to the south have one as well. And so we're kind of missing it. And actually, when the COPAC was operating, I'd kind of go to their meetings, right? I'd try to kind of weasel my way in there and just kind of talk about what they're up to and find out what they're up to. And that's really when the conversation started, is that where should we be a participant? Where can we leverage our best ability to find resources? Anyway.
How would Port of Olympia fit into this?
They'd be a constituent member of the district, and we could apply for grants on their behalf, or we could support their grant application, and they could enter that as a member of a recognized district.
Which might open a few more doors or something.
It should open a few more doors.
One of the proudest things I ever did as an economic developer was when I was in Snohomish. Actually, it didn't really manifest till I came down here. Was the tragic slide at Oso. You remember the highway going up to Darrington, and Darrington is the end of the road. there's no more roads after Darrington, east of Homish County. And so we identified that road as a critical life link to those communities, Darrington, and there's another small town out, this community out there, but also, and then there's a small community and then Darrington. We actually put into play is what could we do if there was a disaster that took out that road at the highway out to. So we put together a plan that could be implemented right away. What resources are there? What federal agencies could we immediately call? And so we actually had the district identify that as a critical recovery plan. And then I got a call the next day after the OSO plan, that OSO slide. It was very tragic, took a number of lives, and I knew a lot of the families there that were just destroyed by that. But the call the next day was, hey, just want to have heads up, that plan that we put into place, we're using it today. And it wasn't 24 hours before they had resources on ground to do that. Those are very pragmatic economic developers. A lot of times they go, oh, we did this building and we're creating this manufacturing plant. That was community development, and that's what we use that district for, is to identify those resources that we can immediately put into play long-term for infrastructure as well as job creation. So anyway, that was just a side note to that. That was a wonderful moment, bittersweet moment for me to identify that work that we had envisioned, work that we put into play, that work that we had approved by the district was being used. So.
I think tangential to that, there's a required section in the plan called resiliency. Like if something happens here, how resilient is your community? And I remember that the emergency management people asked the Thurston Strong team to come and say, hey, how do you guys coordinate all that stuff, right? We just did the economy, but what if I-5 goes out? What if something breaks at a port dock? How are we gonna get people and goods in and out? So if we can identify those things through this plan, then we can be eligible to prepare for those situations. And I'm sorry for interrupting.
No worries. Commissioner Mensa, questions?
Not too many. I guess I'm curious. I feel like you're going pretty quick. And this part about admin funded through EDA, $75,000 annually for 3 to 5 year periods. Would that go to then someone's got to update the SEDS plan every 3 years. So that would go maybe to help hire someone like you to help us update that plan?
No, so that would be separate. So the money would go to somebody probably in Michael's office, a staff person, that they may also supplement the funding, and they're in charge of the district and also whatever Michael has them do at the EDC. The EDA will separately fund an update of the plan, so long as you remain in good standing.
Okay, so that's additional administration funding that comes.
Well, so there's admin funding for the operation of the district, and then there's plan update funding that you would apply for separately.
And
Or you could do it
apply
yourself.
For that from who? Where
EDA,
would the funding come from?
EDA, Economic
Federal,
Development Administration, Commerce, federal.
Department of Commerce.
Yeah.
United States Economic Development Administration.
Yeah.
For the Department of Commerce.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have any questions.
Yeah, and I would say the plan update, once it's created, you're not reinventing it and doing all the heavy lifting, you're updating the facts and figures. So it might be something that the EDC can do in-house without additional funding.
Thank you. My question is, just looking at all these different counties, I know that we all have different priorities and we have different focuses. While Thurston County might want to focus on climate change, that's definitely not the priority of some other counties in this specific area. So I'm just wondering how that works with that and accessing grants.
Well, so that is the central issue that we'll have to struggle through as a 4-county region. Because just reviewing the needs in the other counties, we could spend $10 billion in each and only get halfway there. So we're gonna have to have a process in place for identifying the priorities that we all agree to, and that's why we talked about the governance structure. You know, we don't need to know that today, but we're going to have to face it. You know, I look at, you know, Pacific County has crumbling marinas and they rely on fishing for their economy, right? That's important, I can't deny that. Mason has an employer that could pay living wage jobs tomorrow if we could just get a substation in place. So in Thurston County, there's 100 other things. So I think that, you know, this isn't gonna be the solution for all of our problems and challenges, but it's gonna give us access to solve some of them that we can't yet address.
One of the things that this answer is less technical than not. One of the things that Jason and I were talking about 10 years ago, we've been kind of bouncing around on this thing for a while, is the notion that how do the economic development councils play together? We're kind of umbrellaed under the Pacific Mountain Workforce Development Council, but that's workforce and it's tangentially associated with it, but this is different. So we have been working very, very diligently to ensure that there's a relationship between my organization that I represent, Thurston County, and the organizations that do the similar work in Mason, Grays Harbor, Pacific, and even Lewis County. We call ourselves the PAC-5 economic developers, very loosely based. We meet on a regular basis on a variety of things, and we recognize that there's a difference between the priorities of Pacific County and Thurston County. But we can start drawing the links between the vibrancy that can reside by doing shared work in partnership. The Economic Development District won't take away the priorities of each county. In fact, it will elevate them in a different way, but it also builds those linkages so the economic development practitioners, there's an economic development manager at each one of the counties now down there, that there are those links that this could be that thing, and it will be that thing. So we've worked hard to ensure that there is a relationship amongst the economic development practitioners. We all recognize that we have different goals and needs, but we also recognize that the success of Aberdeen is certainly the success of Olympia, because it builds that community vibrancy, expands that community notion a little bit broader on a geographic scale.
I would say, Commissioner Mayhew, one way to think about it, there's a new federal program coming out called Recompete. I don't know if you've heard of it. But essentially, in a nutshell, it's asking communities to identify what are the pipelines of poverty in your community and what could you do if you had the money to change that trajectory. And so I think, you know, once we're part of a district, we can apply as a member of a district, but you can apply for Thurston County, Mason County could apply, Grays Harbor could apply, and then it's just a matter of how competitive you are, but at least you're in the door because you are part of a district.
God, this is such a good point. I was invited to a session in Tacoma last month to talk about that recompete. Everybody was at the table, but I was sitting back here because I'm not part of a district. And I was like, man, I'm just itching to get to that table and talk about it. But we have to be at the table. We just absolutely have to. Miss 2 hours of conversation of input is how that recompete could be taken advantage of in support Thurston County's economy. Sitting, third row back, and it's fine. It's nice to be invited, but at the end of the day, we have to be at the table, and we have to be invited to be at the table and be recognized officially as a member of that table. So,
I think.
Commissioner
Did I
Evans and then
cut
Ramiro
Ralph
and then,
off?
nope, no, go ahead.
But when you talk about those individual priorities that each jurisdiction has, we strategize when we put things together. And if you look at, the national scene or the local, governor, president, they've got some priorities that we could match, with that application. It doesn't have to do it in total, but anytime you match up your process with somebody upstream, you're better off, so. I would think it would fit just right what you're talking about. It would make us more eligible for things as we strategized and moved forward by making sure that that topic was part of it. I don't know.
How that plays out. A month ago, we had a session with Congresswoman Perez out of the South District. Afterwards, she asked me, what district is Thurston County in? Excuse me, what economic development district are you part of, because we want to support your work? Oh, we're not. Oh, you're not?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll figure that out. So it's just another step that, it's just another barrier that we're finding that we're always having to have to jump over. The hurdle that we're always having to jump over, and it's, sometimes you're successful, a lot of times you're not because of it. But again, it doesn't take away the priorities that you build within this community. We'll always focus on Thurston County's priorities. How we work with it on a regional basis is that art forms that we need to get to. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get you off.
So you had asked about climate change, and I was just thinking kind of the way I'm building our plan is modeled after a plan in Cape Cod. And they do have a built environment section that ties in with their resiliency chapter. And so a project that just came across my desk yesterday is the boardwalk, Percival Landing. And they're thinking, it started out, we need to replace the planks in the boardwalk because they're aging. And then it was like, oh, now the piers are going out. Oh, also it has to come up 6 feet and we need a seawall. And so I thought, that's about $1 billion. But think of everything that's down there. You have a wastewater treatment plant, all those businesses. It's the retail center for the region, et cetera. And so it sort of is a perfect project to tie together economic development, climate change response, et cetera. And so those are the sort of big projects. Who's gonna pay for that? Like, not even the state's gonna pay for that. We need a lot of funding. And so we need to be in a position to go for it.
I just wanted to ask Commissioner McGee's question prompted this thought. I mean, I understand that in the plan, you have to draw the linkages, you said, between the region and focus areas and pillars, all that. Then, does that just get us over, and then that's kind of a predicate to approval? And then, at that point, how limiting is that? I mean, are we, like, so let's say you find, I don't know, I'm just making this up for discussion. You find 5 pillars of kind of commonality between the region that are focuses and stuff. And then plan gets approved, we're an economic development district. Are we then limited to those? Like, I mean, like in Michael's example about the recompete, it really wouldn't have mattered. He's either at the table or he's not. It really does. I mean, I guess I'm asking like how limited, like in terms of projects, like what you described at Percival Landing, that doesn't seem to have anything to do with what might be going on in Aberdeen or Pacific County.
Yeah, so two things. So by the time I'm done with this plan, as long as it's job creation, retention, or inducing private investment, we can tie it to anything in this plan, right? What we can't do, even if it's a workforce thing, like if it's a workforce thing, the EDA isn't interested in funding that, but because we're part of a district, we're eligible to go to Department of Labor and apply for a grant. So once we have this established, we can kind of go wherever we want for whatever we need. Part 2 is as part of the plan, we're gonna have our initial set of priorities, right? Like whatever, for each of our focus areas. And that's something that you'll be able to give input on before it gets approved. And it's something that gets updated periodically. So if something arises a year from now, we can update the SEDS plan and incorporate that priority. And then finally, there are certain grant funds that are available that each county in the region can pursue, and depending on how competitive their application is, they could qualify or not. And so it doesn't have to be, once you identify these 10 things, nothing else can be funded. It's just, these are the things we're actively pursuing. But you can pursue separate things as a member of a district separately.
And can you give a couple of examples of like a priority that, that a district might have across the region?
Yeah, I think the range of examples that I'll provide. One is you have somebody who wants to create a 500-person manufacturing plant, but they don't have the money up front to extend the sewer line because it's $3.8 million. That would be something that creates so many jobs that will impact and overflow the boundaries of one county because people will live in different places. They'll purchase more goods, et cetera. That's an easy example. The other is, I'll go back to the Percival Landing, but you could come up with other scenarios where if we build a seawall and prevent the flooding of, $42.8 billion worth of assets in the downtown, that's pretty high priority. Similarly, if Pacific County, right, their forestry and fishing industries have been in decline for a long time, but now people are starting to flock there because they can afford the housing and work from home, and they don't have broadband. And if we could support another 180 workers working from Pacific County and spending money downtown, that could be a priority. So that's kind of how it works.
Can I throw an example,
Yeah.
a real world example we used up in Snohomish County? There was a string of communities that went between Snohomish and King, timber impacted communities. If you looked at the SEDS for the Central Puget Sound Economic Development District at the time, they did not identify timber impacted communities. But we knew that the unemployment rate in those string of communities was, was like, unemployment rate there was like 4.5% in Everett and Seattle. And in these communities, Skykomish, Monroe, Startup, Gold Bar, it was about 18%. And they really had nothing going. So we collectivized underneath the Economic Development District a notion that will bring these communities together. So each community is going to have their own unique economic development strategy. They're going to work together, they're going to apply for grants together, and they're also going to market each community as either a tourism-based or an emerging sector for economy. And they still use it. It was called the Evergreen Crescent Initiative. It was a beautiful thing. We brought it to the district. They said, you know what? It doesn't meet our priorities, but we like it so much that we're not only going to ask you to apply for these grants, we're also going to promote it as part of our priorities now, because they weren't going that way. Fast forward to 2008. That's why we started the South Thurston Economic Development Initiative, is to string those communities together so they could start working together on a variety of different plans, and you all participated in the study. One thing that's missing is the ability to go after those federal EDA funds, because we're not part of the district. So that's how we used up there, was the notion that we're gonna string these communities together. We're gonna actually fund, we actually funded a circuit rider that would go from each town to town to do business development and business advocacy and work with the city councils on their individual economic development. It was a thing of beauty. It was still going on today, not as robust as it was, but it was a thing of beauty when you think about a little community of Gold Bar having their own economic development plan. They just didn't even think about it. It's like, grow up, you go work in the woods. Well, those jobs are gone. So, but now there's promotion, there's tourism, there's da-da-da-da-da-da. It was a cool thing. It really was. I don't know if it answered your question, but that's where I went with your question, so.
And to wrap up the other way, because we're doing 3-dimensional chess with this plan, right? And so remember that, I know I went fast, I apologize, but and what EDA is prioritizing right now, number 1 was equity. And we just happened to get really lucky when you had your COVID funding, and we created our 24-month Respond Recover plan, reset. And we identified equity as something we wanted to address. And one of the first things we did with the remaining dollars is we created those startup grants and target zones. Do you remember that? You paid for that? And we started 10 businesses. And I work in a lot of communities all over the place. And when they hear about that, they're like, what? You did that? How did you do that? And now they want to do it. But we got lucky because we had those one-time dollars, right? And so back to that revolving loan fund, if we can get some federal dollars to do that, we can repeat that success over and over and over and really build true equity. So that's the whole continuum of priorities that I would imagine we might see.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I understand the value, 30,000 foot level of this district, access to grants. You know, that has been very clear from the beginning, since last year. And I think all of us can probably agree the access to money for economic development is something that certainly the county can support. In following up on the priority conversation, since we're talking about a region, it's one thing is having a conversation as to what the priorities will be on the four counties. But it's a different conversation what the priorities will be within Thurston County. Because the priorities is on the eyes of the beholder for each jurisdiction. Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater will have their own priorities as to what their project will be. Then the priority within Thurston County is gonna be, as I assume the other counties will be more complex. So have the cities been informed about this potential option? And their support, I think, is gonna be key, and how we establish the governance of this new district, I think, is gonna be essential to establish those priorities. Because, you know, the county could have a priority, economic development in Grand Mount. It is extremely important for the county. How are we gonna be competing with the city of Olympia, your example of the Percival Landing? And that is really probably, I think, for me, is understanding the governance. You know, one thing is forming the district, and Michael, you have been very clear. You know, have you belong to a district? No, and then you check the box and you get access to money. But then, the projects, if we were to be, you know, intentional about economic development within the plan, we need to make sure that we agree within the Thurston County region first, what those priorities are. So understanding what the governance will be, I know that you have a request for I believe, a resolution to support. Eventually, it's gonna lead this to a new local agreement among all the different counties, or the resolution is just a willingness to participate on that conversation.
So
We
we.
know there is a lot of stuff, but
Sure, there is a lot of stuff. Our regional manager that's based in Seattle said there's flexibility on how you do the formal recognition. And so we'll be working with her to clarify that over time. Right now, we believe it's just a resolution that supports formation of the district and something that it'll be operated out of the Thurston EDC or however we end up. So Michael's job in Thurston County will be to understand what the county and the city's priorities are and how to pull some of those things into the district. Some of them are standalone. You just get them done like we've always done them, right? Because we've never had a district. And then the same thing will be for Jennifer Berea in Mason County. She's got to make sure she knows what her commissioners are interested in, and also the city of Shelton, right? And how to navigate things into the district. In terms of like ready, aim, shoot priorities, I think the EDA is probably gonna be a good arbiter of what those are, because they'll say, that's a nice project, but this one creates X amount of jobs or saves X amount of jobs and induces this much spending, and that's a huge impact, and that's the return the federal government is looking for with its dollars. So I think that'll sort out some of that. And then I think the governance structure, which we don't have yet, will be, you know, there'll be a space for a conversation about how do we prioritize these different things that everybody wants to do. In terms of the cities in Thurston County, we're meeting with the practitioners, which is basically the Thurston Strong team soon, I forgot the date. They know we're doing this, they're supportive of it, and they're all gonna want what they want, and we're gonna have the conversation.
Go ahead, Rob.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Apologies if this is a little bit more foundational. So Colpack is made up of Mason, Grace Harbor, and Pacific,
Yeah.
is that correct? Okay. And did I catch that they were currently non-operational?
Yeah, so it was run through the conservation district in Pacific County, I think, for years, and they were really doing conservation district kind of things. So people kind of fell away from it maybe. But it hadn't been closed out or anything, and so Michael asked, gosh, we already do Pack Mountain stuff together, what do you think if we, Michael just has 1,000% more capacity than the other EDCs. We're just bigger, and Michael's built a huge machine. And so we could administer it from here without breaking the bank. And that's just,
Kind of leads me to my question, and that being, what has the conversation been like with those three counties and their willingness to align with Thurston County as a larger EDC? Because they would be inviting a larger jurisdiction into that pool, which
I'm gonna let you talk about those conversations, but one thing that we have done, I think one of the reasons that we're able to do this now is that we had done that industry cluster study and 2 subsequent updates with those counties, and we never did them bad. It's very inclusive, and they have, now Pack Mountain has a data contract with me, so they can ask for any data they want anytime, so it's been kind of beneficial to them when they're going after grants or anything, so we've built a relationship, and then Michael's gone above and beyond.
That's where I'd start. That's where I would immediately went, is the original cluster analysis that we took, I don't know, 15 years ago. The conversation that we had at the time was, hey, maybe we ought to work together on this economic development district, and that's really how we all started kind of working on it. That's kind of how I kind of weaseled my way into those meetings with those folks, was that the cluster analysis. Your question has to do with how we work together as an economic development confederation. And so we're all similarly aligned. We're all associate development organizations. Thank you very much, by the way, for that designation. We're all similarly aligned. We're organized in the same way. We're all 501c, whatever it is. So there's a lot of commonality there. They also recognize the concern of what happens at the Central Puget Sound Economic Development. And I don't mean to speak disparagingly about how they operate there, but their governance model is really weighted on population. And that's what's concerning to ours. King County has all the votes. Even though Snohomish County has 5 people at the table, King County has 15. Et cetera. And so there's a concern about that. We have to be aware of that. And we have to be aware of that this economic development district that we're constructing is respectful to the values of each one of the people at the table and the committees at the table. Romero's question about how do you ensure that the projects are aligned with the overall strategy, they're aligned with the notion of moving forward. We have to be also aware that just because we're having the sets doesn't mean that you can't also apply for a grant on your own outside the district. Just means you can also check a box, say we're part of a district and here's where it fits in the sets. It may not be the top priorities. You can still move forward. We just have to be aware of how we construct the governance model. And right now we're starting to kind of address that question right now. We could do a Senate model or we can representative model. Every county gets 2 votes, whatever it is, or every county gets based upon the population. There is a concern that the Thurston Economic Development Council is gonna take over. I have no desires to do that. My board does not have a desire to do that. Every year we talk about it in our strategic planning, so that if this thing happens, we have a desire to ensure that new resources are brought into this community that weren't there before. And I think if we focus on that mission, we'll be good. It'll take some growing pains, and we'll need a facilitator to lead us through that, but we're all willing to have that conversation.
I think, it's two thoughts on that. One is that, so we're like a vampire, we have to be invited in, right? And so if we go north, we're part of Pierce and King County, and if we go south, we're part of Clark County. And then these friendly, gentle people have invited us into their existing region. So we're not creating our own new region, we're part of it existing. And so we have to show the utmost respect and fairness in the governance structure. And I'm thinking back to a project I worked on a couple years ago where we merged 5 sewer utilities in Clark County, including Battleground. I don't know if you've ever visited there. And we had to get them to trust each other. But what we did first was we did the work and found out if we merged these, how good would that be lighting up the I-5 corridor for economic development. Once they saw the beauty of that, then they had to figure out how to get along. right? And so this is the same thing. It's like, let's keep our eye on the prize here. And we won't get everything we want, but we'll get more than we have. And everybody's gonna get a share. It's sort of like block grants. People have to partner. In 1 year, it's Tumwater's year, yay, and the next is it's Lacey's. And what we created for that Clark County thing was sort of a Senate House structure, right? So there's still the big players, still got to get a big vote or veto power. But every player gets a shot at access to a grant.
One of the reasons why it fell apart, Colpack fell apart, was Jason's exactly right, is that they were, the management, the application of the work was not in alignment with the community goals of having this thing move forward. So the cities and the other organizations said, you know what, we're out. Because you're not doing the work, you're doing the work of what you want to do within your charter of your host organization. We have to be very careful about that. And so as long as we're aware of it, we plan for it, and we plan around, kind of ensuring that we have a pathway forward, pitfalls. Don't have an answer for you, but the relationship I have with those other economic development councils is pretty strong.
I'm trying to follow Andy's rule of be classy. Anyway, and polite. We've got an issue that's, would cross over two economic, development districts, and that's the Chehalis River Basin issue, which, is Lewis County and Thurston County, and actually we probably contribute 50% to their flooding down there. And, it affects Grays Harbor County, Thurston County, Lewis County, and they're another district. So how does that work? That could that even pull funding together for solutions even better, especially with your federal folks? We got two economic districts kind of crossing over, dealing with one issue, and it would save jobs and it would create jobs. So, and solve a lot of problems. So I would think that would be a good example to refer to that maybe would be beneficial to all parties concerned. And I say we're the problem because the Skookumchuck River comes out of Thurston County, and that adds about 50%.
Well, you should be a professor. This would be a great case to run by students. So the point you make about if two districts came together with a proposal on paper, just stopping right there, that would be very popular, I suspect, at the federal government, because that's a lot of impact. That's a lot of congressional districts covered. But the question would be, well, how many jobs saved or created? And what kind of private investment does it leverage? And if it doesn't score well there, it's probably not moving forward. That's part one. Part two would be, okay, so Thurston's making a proposal, a priority out of a Lewis-Thurston thing, and then how does Pacific Mason, Grays Harbor feel about that? Like,
Grays Harbor would be affected, but the others maybe not.
yeah. So it's the sort of thing we would absolutely, through whatever structure we put together at the end, process and see, does it float to the top or not? I personally don't know how many jobs we're talking about, because it takes an I-5 and
Quite a
Lewis.
few. Just out of Lewis County.
It could be a great project. But EDA might also say, work with ag or work with whoever, and that's
Yeah,
fine.
but maybe it would open doors to work with those folks, because you'd check that box. Maybe you'd get two boxes to check.
Okay, 9:56, let's.
Yeah, so next steps, we'll work on a resolution to process through, and that will be the next step, I believe.
Yeah, we'll do the study, we're visiting all the counties and doing the engagement. So through Jenica, we will either send you a request for more input on something or to distribute a survey to your constituents. And then eventually we'll get to the resolution.
Okay,
We're trying to do all of that by late summer.
sounds good.
Okay, so with that, 9:57, thank you very much, we are adjourned.